I never thought a pile of firewood would become the center of a legal battle that would consume 18 months of my life. But when Sharon Kensington knocked on my door that October morning with her clipboard and her saccharine smile, I should have seen it coming. My name is Paul Kellerman, and I had been living in the Meadowbrook Estates development in Bozeman, Montana, for 3 years when this whole mess started. I bought my property specifically because it sat on 2 acres at the edge of the development, backing up against national forest land. The extra space meant I could have my woodworking shop, my garden, and most importantly, room to stack the cords of wood I processed every year. Montana winters are no joke. We are talking about temperatures that regularly drop below zero, snow that starts in October and does not fully melt until May, and heating bills that can bankrupt you if you are not careful. That is why I invested in a quality wood stove when I moved in and why I spent my summers and falls cutting, splitting, and stacking firewood. Between my own trees that needed thinning, deadfall from the national forest with the proper permits, and occasional loads I would buy from local loggers, I typically put up about 12 cords each year. I used maybe 6 for myself, and I sold the rest to friends and neighbors for a fair price, just enough to cover my chainsaw maintenance and gas. Sharon was the president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, a position she had held for 7 years and guarded like a dragon hoarding gold. She was in her early 50s, with that specific haircut that seems to be issued along with HOA board membership, and she wore her authority like a weapon. I had managed to mostly avoid her scrutiny by keeping my property neat, paying my dues on time, and generally flying under the radar. That morning, she stood on my porch in her pressed khakis and fleece vest, looking past me at the neatly stacked rows of split wood that lined the side of my shop. I had just finished processing a particularly nice load of lodge pole pine, and the fresh split wood gleamed golden in the autumn sun. "Good morning, Paul," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I hope I am not catching you at a bad time." "Morning, Sharon. What can I do for you?" I kept my hand on the door, not inviting her in. "Well, I have been hearing from several residents about your firewood operation here." She gestured at my woodpile with her pen. "It is quite impressive, really. How much do you have stacked up?" "About 10 cords right now. Still have another 2 to process before the ground freezes." Her eyes lit up in a way that made my stomach tighten. "That is wonderful. You see, I have been thinking about the community, and with energy costs going up, many of our residents are struggling with their heating bills. It occurred to me that having a renewable resource right here in the neighborhood could be such a blessing for everyone." I felt the trap closing but could not quite see its shape yet. "I sell to folks who want it. Did someone need to put in an order?" "Oh no, nothing like that," she laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "I was thinking more about community spirit. You have all this wood, far more than one person needs, and we have elderly residents on fixed incomes, single mothers struggling to make ends meet. It seems only right that someone with an abundance should share with those in need, do not you think?" There it was. I kept my face neutral. "I work about 300 hours every year to put up this wood, Sharon. The equipment, the permits, the physical labor, it is not like it just appears." "I understand that, truly I do." Her voice dripped with false sympathy. "But we are a community, Paul. When you bought here, you agreed to uphold certain standards and contribute to the collective good. I have been reviewing our bylaws, and there are provisions about community resources and shared amenities. Firewood is not an amenity. It is personal property that I create with my own labor on my own land." Her smile turned brittle. "Your land, yes, but within the community. Let me be clear about what I am proposing. The HOA would like to establish a community firewood program. You would contribute half of your annual production to a community pool, and we would distribute it to residents in need. Think of it as a wonderful public relations opportunity. We could even put up a little sign, Paul Kellerman Community Woodlot or something. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It did not come. You want me to give you 6 cords of wood, which represents about 150 hours of my labor, not to mention equipment costs and permits, for free for the community, she corrected. And it is hardly free. You would be earning goodwill, helping your neighbors, and demonstrating the kind of community spirit that makes Meadowbrook Estates special. No. The word hung in the cold October air between us. Sharon's smile finally dropped. I am sorry, I do not think you understand. This is not really a request. The HOA board met last week, and we voted to implement this program. You have a responsibility to your neighbors. The HOA board does not have the authority to confiscate my personal property. And you definitely do not have the authority to volunteer me for 150 hours of unpaid labor. I kept my voice level but firm. Sharon's face flushed. We are not confiscating anything. We are asking you to be a good neighbor. But if you want to be difficult about this, I should mention that we have received several complaints about your operation. The noise from your chainsaw and log splitter, the truck traffic, the visual impact of all that wood stacked up. It would be unfortunate if the board had to start enforcing some of our stricter ordinances about home businesses and exterior storage. There was the real threat. I felt anger kindle in my gut, but kept it in check. I do not run a business. I process firewood for personal use and occasionally sell excess to friends. The truck traffic amounts to maybe 6 trips per year. My wood is neatly stacked and barely visible from the road, and I only run my equipment during permitted hours, never early morning or evenings. That is your interpretation, Sharon said coldly. The board might see things differently. Think about it, Paul. This could go very easily, or it could become very complicated. I will give you until the end of the week to agree to the community program. If you choose to be uncooperative, well, we will have to take other measures. She turned and walked back to her white Lexus, leaving me standing in the doorway with my blood pressure rising and a sense of impending disaster settling over me like a dark cloud. I immediately called my buddy Derek, who had lived in Meadowbrook for 8 years and had his own run-ins with Sharon and the HOA board. He came over that evening with pizza and beer, and we sat in my shop while I recounted the morning's conversation. She cannot actually make you give her your firewood, Derek said, biting into a slice of pepperoni. That is insane, even for Sharon. She is threatening to come after me with violations if I do not comply, make my life hell with fines and complaints. Derek nodded slowly. That is her playbook. She did something similar to the Hendersons when they refused to take down their kids' treehouse. Suddenly, they were getting citations for grass height, mailbox color, and having their garbage cans visible from the street. Cost them about $5,000 in fines before they finally sold and moved. That is extortion. Yeah, but it is death by 1,000 cuts. Each individual citation is technically within her authority as HOA president. Fighting them means filing appeals, going to board meetings, potentially hiring a lawyer. Most people just give in or leave. He took a long drink of his beer. What are you going to do? I am not giving her my wood, I said flatly. I put too much work into it, but I need to be smart about this. Over the next few days, I did my homework. I read through the entire HOA covenant, all 67 pages of it. I documented my wood stacks with photographs and measurements, showing they met all setback requirements and were not visible from the street or neighboring properties. I pulled my permits for forest deadfall collection. I even got a letter from the county confirming that my firewood activities did not constitute a business requiring a home occupation permit. When Sharon's deadline came and went with no response from me, the first citation arrived in my mailbox 2 days later. According to the violation notice, my woodpile constituted excessive exterior storage and was not in keeping with the aesthetic standards of the community. I had 10 days to remove it or face a $50 per day fine. The second notice came 3 days after that. Apparently, someone had complained about noise violations from my chainsaw at 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday. The fact that HOA noise restrictions did not kick in until before 7 on weekdays and 8 on weekends did not seem to matter. Another potential $50 per day fine. The third notice cited me for commercial activity without board approval because someone had seen a neighbor loading firewood from my property. Never mind that I had gifted him 2 cords as a thank you for helping me fix my truck earlier that year. I filed appeals on all 3 citations, which meant appearing before the HOA board at their monthly meeting. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse on a Tuesday evening in early November. About 20 residents showed up, most of them probably for the free cookies Sharon always provided. The board consisted of Sharon and 4 other members. Tom Gunderson, a retired accountant who seemed to go along with whatever Sharon wanted. Patricia Mills, a real estate agent who spent most meetings checking her phone. David Chen, a younger guy who had only been on the board for 6 months and seemed uncomfortable with the whole thing. And Barbara Fletcher, who had been Sharon's close friend for years and served as her rubber stamp. I sat through 45 minutes of mind-numbing discussions about holiday decoration guidelines and the pool maintenance budget before Sharon finally called my appeals. Next we have Paul Kellerman, appealing 3 citations issued this month. Sharon's voice was coldly professional. "Mr. Kellerman, you have 5 minutes to present your case." I stood, holding my folder of documentation. "Thank you. I am appealing these citations because they are baseless and represent a pattern of harassment stemming from my refusal to participate in an unauthorized program to confiscate my personal property." Barbara gasped dramatically. Tom frowned. Patricia looked up from her phone. "That is quite an accusation," Sharon said, her voice sharp. "These citations were issued based on legitimate complaints from residents. Then I would like to see those complaints. Under the HOA bylaws, I have the right to face my accusers and review any evidence used against me." Sharon's jaw tightened. "The board protects the privacy of residents who file complaints. The bylaws do not provide for anonymous complaints." Section 12, Paragraph 4 clearly states that any violation citation must be accompanied by the specific complaint or direct observation by a board member. I am requesting copies of the complaints, as is my right. I could see David Chen flipping through his copy of the bylaws. He found the section and nodded slowly. "He is right," David said quietly. "If there were complaints, he is entitled to review them." Sharon shot him a look that could have curdled milk. "The complaints were verbal, made directly to me as board president. I observed the violations myself and confirmed them." "So there are no actual complaints from residents?" I pressed. "You personally decided my firewood represents excessive storage, even though it meets all setback requirements and is not visible from the street or neighboring properties." "I have photographs and measurements here." I pulled them out and handed copies to each board member. "You personally decided my chainsaw running at 7:30 on a Saturday morning violated noise ordinances, even though the restrictions do not start until 8 on weekends. And you personally decided that giving firewood to a friend constitutes commercial activity, even though no money changed hands, and I have a letter from the county stating I am not operating a business. I placed all my documentation on the table. What this actually is retaliation because I refuse to give the HOA free access to my firewood. Mrs. Kensington came to my home and demanded I provide half my annual production, roughly 6 cords of wood representing about 150 hours of my labor, to a so-called community program. When I refused, suddenly I am drowning in citations. The room had gone very quiet. Several residents who had been half listening were now paying full attention. "That is not what happened," Sharon said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "I suggested a community-minded program, and you rudely refused. These citations are completely unrelated and based on legitimate concerns about your activities. Then show me the complaints. Show me the residents who are concerned. Show me any board vote authorizing this community firewood program, because I have reviewed the minutes from the last 6 months, and there is no mention of it." David Chen was looking at Sharon now with a puzzled expression. Patricia had actually put her phone down. Tom was studying the table in front of him like it held the secrets of the universe. "I move that we table these citations pending further review," David said suddenly. "I think we need to investigate the circumstances more thoroughly before we assess any fines." "Second," Patricia said, to everyone's surprise, including probably her own. Sharon looked like she wanted to argue, but Robert's rules of order meant she had to call the vote. It passed 3-2 with only Sharon and Barbara voting against it. "Fine," Sharon said tightly. "We will table this for now. But Mr. Kellerman, you should be aware that this board takes violations seriously, and we will be watching your property very closely going forward." "I would expect nothing less," I said evenly. "And I will be documenting everything, just to be safe." I left the meeting feeling like I had won a battle, but knowing the war was far from over. Derek, who had shown up to watch the proceedings, walked out with me. "That was intense," he said once we were in the parking lot. "Did you see Sharon's face when you called her out in front of everyone?" "Yeah, I am pretty sure I just made an enemy for life." I unlocked my truck. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." I had no idea how right I was. The harassment started small. My trash cans were knocked over twice in 1 week, garbage strewn across my driveway. Someone filed a complaint with the county about my wood stove, claiming it was producing excessive smoke, which resulted in an inspector coming out and finding absolutely nothing wrong. A letter appeared in my mailbox, not from the HOA but typed and anonymous, suggesting I should move somewhere more appropriate for my lifestyle. I installed security cameras around my property, which proved to be a smart investment. 2 weeks after the board meeting, the cameras caught Sharon herself walking around my woodpile at 6 in the morning, taking photographs and measurements. When she noticed one of the cameras, she actually flipped it off before walking back to her car. I made copies of the footage and stored them safely, figuring I might need evidence eventually. December arrived with an early cold snap, temperatures dropping into the negative numbers. My wood stove kept my house toasty warm while my neighbors' heating bills apparently went through the roof. I heard through the grapevine that Sharon had been telling people I was hoarding wood and driving up fuel prices for everyone else, which made 0 sense, but apparently some people believed it. Then things escalated in a way I did not see coming. I came home from my job at the engineering firm where I worked to find a notice taped to my door. The HOA was holding an emergency special meeting to vote on a new bylaw amendment. The amendment, which I read with growing disbelief, would require any resident who produced, processed, or stored quantities of natural resources exceeding personal use to register with the HOA and make such resources available for community access at reasonable rates to be determined by the board. The meeting was scheduled for 3 days away, which was the minimum notice required for special meetings. Sharon was not messing around anymore. I immediately sent the bylaw to a real estate attorney I found through a friend's recommendation. Her name was Jennifer Rodriguez, and she had experience with HOA disputes. We met the next day at her office in downtown Bozeman. "This is one of the most overreaching HOA proposals I have ever seen," Jennifer said, sliding the papers back across her desk. "They are essentially trying to give themselves the power to seize and redistribute personal property. It would never hold up in court." "But can they pass it?" I asked. "They can pass whatever they want at a board meeting, assuming they get the votes. The question is whether it is enforceable. This would almost certainly violate Montana property law, but fighting it would mean litigation, and that gets expensive." "How expensive are we talking?" "Depends how far they push it. Could be anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000, maybe more if it drags out." She leaned back in her chair. "The real question is why they are targeting you specifically. Is there something else going on?" I explained the whole situation, from Sharon's initial demand to the harassment and retaliation. Jennifer took notes and asked questions. "Okay, this is clearly personal," she said when I finished. "The good news is that works in your favor if this does go to court. The bad news is Sharon sounds like the type who will not back down easily. My advice is to attend the meeting with as many supporters as you can muster and fight the bylaw there. It needs a majority of the board to pass. From what you described, you might have 2 votes against it already. You just need 1 more." The next 2 days were a whirlwind of phone calls and door knocking. I reached out to every resident I knew, explaining what was happening and why it mattered. Derek helped, and so did a few other neighbors who had their own grievances with Sharon's heavy-handed leadership. "This is not just about firewood," I told people. "This is about the HOA deciding they can take your personal property whenever they want. Today, it is my firewood. Tomorrow it could be your garden produce, your workshop tools, or anything else they decide the community needs." The message resonated. A lot of people in Meadowbrook had chosen Montana specifically because they valued independence and property rights. The idea of an HOA board having the power to redistribute personal property did not sit well, even with folks who had no love for me personally. The night of the special meeting, the community clubhouse was packed. Every seat was full and people lined the walls. Sharon looked surprised and not particularly pleased by the turnout. She gavelled the meeting to order and launched into a prepared speech about community values and shared prosperity. "We have an opportunity here to make Meadowbrook Estates a model of cooperative living," she said, her voice carrying that rehearsed quality of someone who had practiced in front of a mirror. "In these difficult economic times, those of us who have more should help those who have less. This bylaw simply formalizes that spirit of generosity and ensures that community resources benefit the entire community." "Firewood is not a community resource," I called out from my seat. "It is personal property." Sharon's eyes found me in the crowd. "You have processed wood from trees on national forest land, which belongs to all of us. You use community roads to transport it. Your activity impacts the entire neighborhood. That makes it a community concern. I have permits for the deadfall I collect, issued by the Forest Service. I pay taxes for those roads like everyone else, and my activity impacts nobody. This whole thing is retaliation because I would not give you free wood." "That is absolutely false," Sharon snapped, her composure cracking. "This is about fairness and community responsibility." An older woman I recognized from 3 streets over stood up. Her name was Helen, and she lived alone on a fixed income. Sharon, I am one of those residents struggling with heating costs, and I think this whole thing is ridiculous. If Paul Kellerman wants to sell me firewood at a fair price, great. But the HOA has no business taking his property and giving it away. That is un-American. Several people clapped. Sharon's face reddened. Another resident stood, a guy named Mike who had his own woodworking shop. What is next, Sharon? You going to demand I share my lumber? That Larry down the street has to give away the vegetables from his garden. This is insane. The meeting devolved into a heated debate that lasted nearly 2 hours. Sharon kept trying to steer things back to her talking points about community and sharing, but she had lost the room. Finally, she called for the vote. Tom voted yes, as expected. Barbara voted yes. Patricia surprised no one by voting no, probably because she understood the potential legal liability. David voted no emphatically, making a short speech about property rights that got applause. That left Sharon herself as the tiebreaker. She sat there for a long moment, her face tight with anger, before voting yes. The motion fails 2-3, David said before Sharon could announce the results herself. The bylaw amendment is rejected. Sharon looked like she wanted to explode. Instead, she simply gavelled the meeting closed and walked out without another word, Barbara scurrying after her. People came up to me afterward, shaking my hand and expressing support. It felt good, but I knew this was not over. Sharon had been publicly humiliated, and people like her did not forget that. I was right to be worried. 2 weeks later, in early January with snow piled high and temperatures brutal, I woke to find my woodpile had been vandalized. Someone had taken a chainsaw to several of my neatly stacked cords, cutting through multiple pieces at random and leaving a mess of partially severed logs scattered across the frozen ground. It was not theft, it was pure destruction, and it represented hours of work ruined. The security cameras had been spray painted over the night before the vandalism, too carefully done to be coincidence. This was planned. I called the sheriff's office and filed a report. Deputy Marshal came out, took photos and notes, and was sympathetic but not optimistic. Without camera footage, it is going to be hard to prove who did this, he said. You have any enemies? You could say that. I explained the situation with the HOA. He whistled low. HOA disputes can get nasty. I worked a case a few years back where board members were slashing tires and breaking windows. Folks get crazy about property and rules. He handed me a case number. Keep an eye out and call us if anything else happens. Sometimes these things escalate. I spent the next week cleaning up the damage and trying to salvage what I could. Between the vandalism and the brutally cold weather, I was burning through my wood faster than planned. I was going to run short before spring if I did not restock, which meant buying from a supplier at premium winter prices. Then I got the lawsuit. The envelope came certified mail, requiring my signature. Inside was a complaint filed by the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, Inc. against me personally. They were suing me for breach of contract, violating HOA covenants, operating an illegal business, creating a nuisance, and something called unjust enrichment. According to the complaint, I had enriched myself using community resources, community roads, and within the community environment. The HOA was seeking damages of $25,000, plus legal fees, plus an injunction requiring me to cease all firewood processing activities. I sat at my kitchen table, reading and rereading the document, feeling the walls close in. This was not posturing or harassment anymore. This was a legal attack that could cost me everything. I called Jennifer Rodriguez immediately. She told me to bring the complaint to her office that afternoon. "They are actually doing this," she said, reading through the filing. "They are really trying to sue you for not giving them your firewood. Can they win? No, not on the merits. Everything here is garbage legally. But that is not really the point, is it? The point is to bury you in legal fees and stress until you give up and move away." She looked up at me. "Defending this, even though you should win easily, is going to cost you at least $15,000, probably more, and that is if they do not appeal or drag it out. So they win either way. Either I give them what they want or I go broke fighting them. That is the calculation Sharon is making, yes." Jennifer tapped her pen on the desk. "But here is the thing. She might have overplayed her hand. This lawsuit is so baseless, so clearly retaliatory, that we can probably countersue for malicious prosecution and harassment. We could go after the HOA for damages and legal fees. Might even be able to pierce the corporate veil and go after Sharon personally if we can show she is abusing her position." Hope flickered. "What would that take? Documentation. Evidence. We need to show a pattern of harassment, abuse of authority, and that this lawsuit is retaliation for you exercising your legal rights. Do you have evidence?" I thought of the security footage of Sharon measuring my woodpile and flipping off the camera. The recordings I had of her threatening me with violations. The timeline of citations and harassment following my refusal to participate in her wood confiscation scheme. "Yeah," I said, "I have evidence." We spent the next several weeks building my defense and preparing a counterclaim. Jennifer subpoenaed HOA records, including emails and meeting minutes. What we found was damning. Sharon had sent multiple emails to other board members explicitly stating she wanted to make an example of me and drive that selfish bastard out of Meadowbrook. She had coordinated the multiple citations, even directing Tom to find something, anything to cite me for. There were text messages between Sharon and Barbara discussing how to word the lawsuit to cause maximum damage. Most damning of all, we found emails showing Sharon had consulted with a lawyer before proposing the community firewood program, and that lawyer had explicitly told her it was probably illegal and definitely unenforceable. She had pushed forward anyway. "This is better than I hoped," Jennifer said, reviewing the documents. "She knew what she was doing was wrong and did it anyway. That is malice clear as day." We filed our response to the lawsuit along with a counterclaim for harassment, abuse of process, malicious prosecution, and emotional distress. We sought $50,000 in damages plus legal fees, and we named both the HOA and Sharon personally as defendants. The next HOA board meeting was something I would never forget. Sharon tried to start the meeting as usual, but David Chen cut her off. "Before we begin regular business, I am calling for a vote of no confidence in Sharon Kensington as board president," he said, his voice steady. "I have lost faith in her leadership, and I believe she has exposed this HOA to significant legal liability through her personal vendetta against Paul Kellerman." Sharon's face went white, then red. "You cannot do that. I have been president for 7 years. I have dedicated myself to this community. You have dedicated yourself to harassing a homeowner who would not bow to your demands," Patricia said, speaking up for probably the first time in years. "I have reviewed the evidence in the lawsuit. David sent it to all of us. What you did was wrong, Sharon, legally wrong and morally wrong." "I second David's motion," Tom said quietly, not meeting Sharon's eyes. Even Barbara looked uncomfortable. "Sharon, maybe you should step down voluntarily. This has gotten out of hand." "I am not stepping down," Sharon said, her voice shaking with fury. "And you cannot make me. I am elected until the annual meeting." "We can remove you for cause with a majority vote," David said. "It is in the bylaws, Section 18. The vote was 4-1, with only Sharon voting to keep herself in place. She stood there for a long moment after David announced the results, her carefully constructed authority crumbling around her. "You are all going to regret this," she said finally. "I made this community what it is. Without me, it will fall apart." "I think we will be fine," Patricia said coolly. Sharon grabbed her papers and her purse and stormed out, slamming the clubhouse door hard enough to rattle the windows. David was elected interim president, and one of the first things the board did was vote to drop the lawsuit against me. They also voted to send a formal letter of apology and to cover my legal fees to date, which came to about $8,000. But I did not drop my counterclaim against Sharon personally. She had made this personal, and I was going to see it through. The case wound its way through the system over the next several months. Sharon hired an expensive lawyer who tried every trick to get the case dismissed, but the evidence was too strong. We had her own emails and text messages showing malice and abuse of authority. We had the timeline of harassment. We had testimony from other residents about her threats and intimidation tactics. In August, almost 10 months after the whole thing started, we finally went to trial. It lasted 3 days. Jennifer systematically laid out the case, showing how Sharon had targeted me for retaliation, abused her authority as HOA president, and filed a baseless lawsuit to harass and intimidate me. We brought in expert witnesses on HOA law and property rights. We showed the judge every piece of evidence we had collected. Sharon's lawyer tried to paint her as a concerned community leader trying to help struggling residents, but it fell flat. The emails were too clear. The timeline was too obvious. The malice was undeniable. The judge ruled in my favor on every count. He awarded me $42,000 in damages, plus my legal fees, which had climbed to nearly $20,000. He issued a permanent injunction prohibiting Sharon from serving on the HOA board or participating in HOA governance in any capacity. In his ruling, the judge stated clearly, "The HOA covenant does not grant board members the authority to confiscate personal property or retaliate against homeowners who refuse to comply with unauthorized demands." Miss Kensington abused her position, violated the plaintiff's rights, and caused substantial harm through her actions. This court will not tolerate such abuse of power. Sharon's face as the judge read the verdict was something I will never forget. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. All that self-righteous authority had been revealed as the petty tyranny it always was. Collecting on the judgment was another matter. Sharon tried to hide assets, claimed poverty, and generally made the process as difficult as possible. Eventually, we had to garnish her wages and place liens on her property. It took another 6 months to collect most of what she owed, and I never did get every penny. But it was not really about the money, not anymore. It was about the principle. It was about standing up to a bully who thought her position made her untouchable. The vandalism to my woodpile was never officially solved, but Sharon's teenage nephew confessed to me about a year later, after Sharon had moved to Billings to live with her sister. He said she had paid him $500 to do it, and he was sorry. He seemed genuinely remorseful, so I did not press charges. The kid had been manipulated by his aunt, and he was trying to make amends. Life in Meadowbrook Estates improved dramatically after Sharon's departure. David served as president for 2 years and brought a much more reasonable, collaborative approach to governance. The board focused on actual community issues like road maintenance and snow removal instead of petty enforcement and power trips. I continued processing firewood, though I installed better security cameras and motion sensing lights just to be safe. I still put up about 12 cords a year, use half for myself, and sell the rest. I even started offering discounted wood to elderly residents and single parents who needed it, though on my terms and as my choice, not because anyone demanded it. Several neighbors who had supported me during the conflict became good friends. Derek and I started a weekly poker game. Helen from down the street brings me cookies at Christmas. Mike and I sometimes collaborate on woodworking projects, combining his lumber with my tools and shop space. The whole experience taught me some important lessons about standing up for yourself, even when it is hard and expensive. About not letting bullies win just because fighting back seems too difficult. About the importance of documentation and evidence. And about how a small amount of power can corrupt people who are not equipped to handle it with integrity. I also learned that most people, when push comes to shove, recognize injustice when they see it. The community could have sided with Sharon. They could have gone along with her narrative about sharing and cooperation. Instead, most residents saw through the rhetoric to the truth underneath. This was about control and retaliation, not community spirit. Sharon's replacement as president, after David stepped down, was a retired teacher named Marcus Williams who actually read the bylaws and believed in following them consistently and fairly. He implemented new policies requiring board transparency, limiting the president's individual authority, and creating an appeals process for homeowners facing citations. The HOA became what it was supposed to be, a body that maintained common areas and enforced reasonable rules, not a vehicle for personal vendettas. I sometimes wonder what Sharon is doing now, whether she learned anything from the experience, or whether she just found new targets for her need to control others. I heard she joined the HOA board in her new community within 6 months of moving, which probably answers that question. As for me, I am still in my house on the edge of Meadowbrook Estates, backing up to National Forest land. My wood stove keeps me warm through the long Montana winters. My shop is full of projects. My property is peaceful and secure. And I have about 10 cords of beautiful lodgepole pine stacked neatly by my shop, with room for more. It represents my labor, my planning, my investment of time and resources. It is mine, earned through work and protected by law, and no one can take it from me simply because they think they should have it. Every time I look at that woodpile, I remember the fight and feel a sense of satisfaction, not because I enjoyed the conflict or the stress or the expense, but because I stood my ground when it mattered. Because I did not let someone take what was mine through intimidation and abuse of authority. The legal battle cost me about $35,000 all told, even after recovering fees from the HOA and Sharon. The judgment in my favor was $42,000, so I came out slightly ahead financially, though not by much after accounting for all the hours and stress. But some things are worth more than money. Self-respect, property rights, the principle of not letting bullies win. Those things are priceless, and I would do it all again if I had to. People sometimes ask me if I regret not just giving Sharon the wood at the beginning, avoiding the whole mess. The answer is absolutely not, because giving in would not have ended it. People like Sharon do not stop when you give them what they want. They just ask for more. The firewood was never really the point. The point was control, power, and domination. If I had surrendered on the wood, she would have found something else to demand, some other way to assert her authority. By fighting back, I not only protected myself but probably helped other residents too. Sharon's removal from the board and the reforms that followed made life better for everyone in Meadowbrook. Sometimes one person standing up can change things for an entire community. The following spring, I decided to do something constructive with the whole experience. I started a blog about HOA disputes and property rights, sharing my story and offering advice to others facing similar situations. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out with their own nightmare HOA stories, seeking guidance and support. I connected people with resources, recommended lawyers, and generally tried to help folks who felt powerless against their HOA boards. It became a passion project, something meaningful that came from all the pain and stress of my own battle. One reader particularly stands out. Her name was Melissa Daniels, and she lived in Colorado Springs. Her HOA was trying to force her to remove a wheelchair ramp she had installed for her disabled daughter, claiming it violated architectural guidelines. Using the strategies and resources I shared, she fought back and won, establishing precedent that reasonable accommodations for disabilities trump HOA aesthetic rules. Another reader, James in Phoenix, was being fined for having solar panels that the HOA claimed were unsightly. Using documentation techniques I recommended and legal arguments from my case, he not only defeated the fines, but got the HOA bylaws changed to explicitly allow renewable energy installations. These stories and dozens of others showed me that my fight had meaning beyond my own situation. By refusing to back down, by documenting everything, and by seeing it through to the end, I had created a roadmap that others could follow. Jennifer Rodriguez and I also developed a relationship beyond attorney-client. She saw the response to my blog and realized there was a real need for legal resources focused specifically on HOA abuse. She started offering free initial consultations to HOA dispute cases and built a practice around helping homeowners fight back against overreaching boards. Last I heard, she had won over 30 cases and had gotten several abusive HOA board members removed from their positions. Life has a way of taking difficult experiences and turning them into something positive if you let it. I never wanted to be an expert on HOA law or property rights disputes. I just wanted to process my firewood in peace. But circumstances thrust me into a battle, and I chose to fight rather than surrender. That choice rippled outward in ways I never anticipated, helping not just me but dozens of other people facing similar injustices. As I write this, sitting in my warm house on a February evening with my wood stove crackling and snow falling outside, I feel content. The battle scars have faded. The stress is long past. What remains is the satisfaction of having stood up for what was right, the friendships forged in difficult times, and the knowledge that I made a difference. My woodpile sits outside, neatly stacked and ready for next winter. It represents more than just fuel for heat now. It represents independence, perseverance, and the fundamental American principle that a person's property and labor are their own, not to be confiscated by those who think their authority gives them the right. Sharon Kensington tried to take that from me, and she failed. The legal system, despite its flaws and expenses, ultimately worked. Justice, though delayed and costly, was served. And a small community in Montana learned that HOA boards serve the homeowners, not the other way around. Sometimes I still get angry when I think about the whole situation. The stress, the expense, the invasion of my peace, the hours spent with lawyers and in court instead of in my shop or with friends. The way Sharon made me feel like I was the problem when I was simply protecting what was mine. But mostly I feel grateful. Grateful for friends who supported me. Grateful for a legal system that, though imperfect, provided a path to justice. Grateful for a community that ultimately stood up for what was right. And grateful for the strength I found in myself to fight when fighting seemed overwhelming. The experience changed me in ways both obvious and subtle. I am more aware now of the potential for abuse in systems we take for granted. I am more willing to speak up when I see injustice. I am more appreciative of genuine community, the kind built on mutual respect rather than enforced compliance. And I am more protective of my property and my rights, having learned firsthand how easily they can be threatened by those who believe their position grants them special authority over others. The firewood I cut and split and stack each year means something different now. It is not just heat for the winter. It is a statement of independence, a reminder that my labor belongs to me, a symbol of the fight I won and the principles I defended. When neighbors stop by to pick up a cord or two, I often tell them the story, at least the abbreviated version. Most are shocked that an HOA would try something so outrageous. Some share their own stories of HOA overreach, though few as extreme as mine. All of them agree that I did the right thing by fighting back. Derek likes to joke that I should run for HOA president myself, bring some real leadership to the board. I always decline. I have no interest in governance or authority over my neighbors. I just want to live my life, work on my projects, and be left alone to manage my own property as I see fit within reasonable rules. That is not too much to ask, and it is certainly not too much to fight for when necessary. As winter deepens, and my wood stove works overtime to keep the cold at bay, I sometimes pause to appreciate the simple pleasure of being warm in my own home, burning wood I processed with my own hands, secure in the knowledge that no one can take it from me without my consent. It is a good feeling, earned through struggle and worth every moment of the fight. The story of how an HOA demanded I share my wood, then sued when I cut their access to it, has become something of a legend in certain circles. I have been interviewed for articles about HOA abuse. I have spoken at homeowners' rights meetings. My legal case has been cited in several subsequent lawsuits involving HOA overreach. None of this was what I wanted or expected when I bought my house in Meadowbrook Estates all those years ago. I just wanted a quiet place with enough land for my hobbies and easy access to the mountains. Instead, I got a crash course in property law, HOA politics, and the importance of standing up to bullies. But I would not change it now, even if I could. The experience, difficult as it was, taught me too much and led to too many positive outcomes. It connected me with good people, gave me a sense of purpose beyond my day job, and proved to me that one person really can make a difference when they refuse to back down from what is right. Sharon Kensington set out to punish me for not giving her what she wanted. Instead, she gave me something far more valuable, the knowledge that I have the strength and the principles to fight for what I believe in, no matter the cost. And that is worth more than all the firewood in Montana.